Anybody that's listening to this that doesn't get accepted to a specific yeshiva or seminary, it does not mean you're a bad person.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you are not going to have the best year ever, assuming wherever you go in Israel. There are hundreds of students and hundreds of applicants that apply to school sometimes, and through a little interview and a little bit of research they're able to do like on you or talk to people about you, they only know you so much. So I've seen too many people that get rejected from a school and think I'm a bad person. They don't want me, you know?
Not I'm a bad person, but like maybe people conclude that like just everyone's better and smarter and whatever than them.
Right. I've seen so many amazing people not get into schools that they wanted to. Okay, there's only so much schools can learn about a student through that interview process, and just like to reiterate that point to everybody that like, just because you get into a place doesn't mean you're not good. Doesn't mean you're a bad student or whatever it may be, and hopefully you're going to have an amazing year. And I've seen that in so many situations. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the BEN podcast. As you guys could tell from the title of this video, I decided to switch things up just a little bit given the time period that we have going on, which is right around yeshiva and seminary decisions. There's a lot of messages, Baruch Hashem, that I get from running Israel Gap Year through the DMs on Instagram, through the consulting that I do with different people. And there's just a lot to talk about to hopefully help you guys in the decision process, because I know it's very stressful and there's a lot of things on everybody's mind. So I decided to bring on my wife, who actually helps me with everything. Shout out to Yali, behind the scenes with Israel Gap Year. And we just wanted to hawk things out in relation to a lot of the things and a lot of the questions that I get from people, but just, everything related to the yeshiva and seminary decision that we possibly could talk about. So we hope you guys enjoy this episode. If you have any follow-up questions, obviously my information, is in the show notes. Feel free to reach out to me, and we will see you guys very soon. Enjoy this week's episode. Welcome to the Israel Gap Year BEN podcast. I'm your host, Avi Proctor, and in each episode, we get BEN in depth into the remarkable lives of individuals in Israel who dedicate themselves to inspiring the next generation of Klal Yisrael. I am super excited for this podcast because, as you guys see on the camera, I'm joined by the most amazing person in my life. That is my wife, Yali. And for those of you that have actually paid attention to the Instagram in the smallest detail, I try to shout you out whenever I can. But now that I'm on air,
I didn't even know you shouted me out.
I try, But now that we're on air, I have to just thank you publicly, because all the behind the scenes things that happen with Israel Gap Year because of you, like our website and a lot of the creative ideas and this podcast idea and all the planning for every podcast, and I could go on. And I just thank you, and I really appreciate all the help, the unacknowledged help publicly, but now we're telling everybody, obviously. So thank you for everything you do.
Thanks for embarrassing me. Of course, it's a pleasure. And as much as this, as much as Israel Gap Year and the BEN podcast is your baby, it's, transferable. So now it's also my baby. And I'm very proud to watch you and what you've done. And we can stop being mushy-gushy now and get on with the point of why we're sitting here together. And that's because I felt like Avi has a lot to say about this topic. And I think, instead of him bringing on someone else to interview, I thought that it would be really worth an episode to sit down and kind of just have a different kind of episode where we just schmooze about things that are on everybody's minds, especially in this time, because yeshiva decisions are coming up, right? When are they coming?
From the date that we post this is coming out Sunday, March 2nd.
Okay.
So I believe it's the 10th is when yeshiva decision is, and I know the seminaries already had their seminary decision time.
Yeah, but shout out to seminary girls. Sorry we missed the boat, but the way the episodes fall out, that's how it happens.
We had to have it this way. But like everyone is still, no matter who you are, guy or girl, you're still like in the mode of like thinking about like, what am I gonna, like, why do I want to go to this school, and all those things relate to this podcast.
Yeah.
So hopefully it's still helpful for people.
Yeah. So we thought it would be just a great opportunity to sit down and kind of talk about different points and like different things that you should consider when making your decision. And yeah.
Let's run it.
Just get right into it?
Let's do it. What's the first thing?
Okay. The first thing I really wanted to talk about is the type of students from the perspective of stereotypes. Every school has a stereotype, and obviously we don't get into the nitty-gritties of which school has what stereotype, but we all know how important is it that, for example, you find yourself to be an intellectual person. How important is it that you go to a school that has intellectual girls? And for a guy that feels like he needs a lot of freedom, like how important is it that he goes to a school where the guys are known to like, be a little wild and crazy, and like does it actually matter? Because there are many students that go to a school. So to what extent do you think a student should decide to go to a seminary yeshiva based on the type of student in general?
I think it's actually very important to go to a school where the students are like you, meaning obviously you have those stereotypes that we could all acknowledge, as you just said, that like they exist around specific schools. This school is more for an intellectual type of learner. This school is for somebody that wants to do chesed and whatnot. And like those stereotypes are there because like these schools have been around for so long, and these are the types of students that go there, right? So some stereotypes, by the way, that people hear are not always so true. So it's important to get those things clear and understand like, okay, what type of students actually go to these schools. But it's definitely something, in my opinion, that people should keep in mind of like, okay, like I'm thinking of these 3 schools to go to for my year next year. And like, are the type of kids that go to that school like me, you know? And like that stereotype that's there, like it's a valid point, in my opinion, for the decision, you know?
Right. Okay, but
what do you think?
No, I'm just wondering about the other half of like what your answer would be, which is what about every other student that goes there that you have no idea about? And like you may say that like this school has a reputation of being so in town, but how do you know? Because did you really ask? Did you really find out if they have any? Did you ask the administration or somebody who went there a few years ago whether there are out-of-town students and how many there are? And have you spoken to an out-of-town student to see how they feel about it? And I feel like these stereotypes are a lot of times just word of mouth and not necessarily actual things. So I think it's true. Like if there's the reputation that everybody there is intellectual, okay, you're right. Like it's likely that the school is going to be more intellectual. But are there other students that aren't? Are there classes that cater to those who aren't? You know, I feel like to like kind of like debunk the myths and then acknowledge the stereotypes.
I'm so glad you're touching on the point, and I just have to say one more thing before we touch on the next thing, is that I've had so many times I've had this conversation about so many specific schools where I'll give you an example. I had a conversation with a kid, I think it was about a year and a half ago. He said, I'm looking into this specific yeshiva, but like I'm an out-of-town guy, and like it's mostly all in-towners. I'm like, where do you hear that from? And he's like, oh, it's no, like this specific yeshiva, like it's all in-town guys. I'm like, have you like spoken to the guys there? Have you seen any statistics? He's like, no, but just like it's what people say.
Right.
And I'm like, do you realize it's literally a 50-50 split? And that's what so many schools try to do, but people get caught up in like, oh, like the school's all in town, you know? And like,
right.
Just, I guess the point of advice for people in this is just do your research, because there's so many stereotypes that like get thrown around about specific schools that are so not true.
Right. Like I guess another good example would be like the students go out all the time. So if you're the type of guy or girl who wants to get serious fast and like you just don't want to waste any of your time, then the question is like, is it like a group of students that are giving that school the reputation, or is it true? Is it true that like a lot of the students do that? And you would want to know that, because if you feel like if you're getting the sense that a lot of kids go who are like X, then you would probably just be cautious when making your decision. Like, okay, I'm going to be surrounded by this. Am I ready for that? You know, is that what I want?
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, great. So I feel like similar to that topic is your own friends. Like besides the type of kid that goes to the school, what about your own friends? How much should you be making your decision based on your friends and where they're going or where they're thinking of going?
Another great question. Thanks for asking that one.
Juiciest one, I know.
Very juicy, by the way. I feel like there are 2 sides to that question, right? There are many conversations I've obviously had with students as well that have said, I don't want to go to this school, or I'm thinking of leaning away from this school because I know X, Y, Z kids are going there. My response, and obviously I just have to preface, like I'm giving generic advice right now, and that anybody who's listening to me right now, just understand that this is generic. And if I knew you and your situation, obviously it would be more, you know, specific to who you are. But I argue both sides of like the student conversation of like, you know, picking a school because of the students. In my opinion, I more take the side of go to a school, even if you're like saying, oh, I know these few kids that are going there and I don't necessarily want to be with them, because Baruch Hashem, there are so many students in Israel, and in most of the schools, there are a lot of kids there. And to say, I don't want to go to a school because this, let's say, other person is going to be there who I obviously, maybe I don't necessarily like, maybe they're not as serious as I want to be when I go into Israel. I don't think that's enough of a reason, because when you get to Israel, if you really like don't want to do what that person's doing, just like, you know, now's the time to kind of go on your own path and like really shape yourself. That's the beauty of Israel, right? There's also the other side of it where you could say, hey, I'm thinking about going to this, you know, yeshiva or seminary because I know these few students that are going there and they happen to be very motivated kids. They're very sweet people. And like, I do want to be surrounded by those people in Israel. So that's another side to it as well, where it's like a huge positive if you want to, you know, go with like a close group of people that you know that will be great influences on you, and you will just like grow together ultimately, right? So I could argue both sides to it, But my like conclusion, and obviously I want to hear your perspective on this in a second, is don't necessarily, go away from a school because specific students are going there. That's my one-liner.
It's just funny that you focus on that. As you guys will probably see throughout this episode, like Avi and I can definitely differ in our opinions sometimes. But it's funny that your mind automatically goes to like who you wouldn't want to be around, who are not good influences. Because in my mind, like at least when I was thinking of the question, I was thinking like where are your friends going? Like you don't want to be a follower and you want to think for yourself, but you also want to know where your friends are going. And yeah, like you can kind of like, you could almost rationalize and convince yourself that you wanted to go to a certain school and really you didn't really want to go to that school, but you end up going just because your friends are going. So I think your points are really true about like your friendlies and your acquaintances, to like really be aware of like who's going to be a good influence on you, who's going to be a bad influence on you, and be aware of those. But like, for example, like your closest, bestest friends, it's like kind of, it's like a hard balance because like you don't want to call it following, but you also kind of want to be with them in seminary and yeshiva and feel like you have that safety net. So I think that in general, like, I agree with you about like friends, but I think regarding really close friends and actually making your decision, to obviously not make your decision because of where your friends are going, and that, it's not a reason just because they're going somewhere where you have a bad feeling about, like, or you feel like it's not for you, to not feel like you have to like fall into that and just jump on the bandwagon. But also friends are important. So if you anyway were considering that school, like I forgive you if when you were making your decision, you were thinking about how nice it could be to still try to branch out when you're in seminary and yeshiva, but also know that you have your friends in the back and you have them as a safety net. So I'm just going to reiterate, like, not to make your decision because of them, but they're for sure a factor that I think is important. And that's not like an embarrassing thing, and it's not a follower thing. I think it's just like your friends lift you up, and if you know that they're good friends, going back to what you said, like if you know that they're generally good influences on you and you feel like you're your best self around them, like there's no reason to like move away from them for no reason, unless like you were inferring, if you feel like you've been in a bad crowd in high school and you haven't really found your place yet, like now's a perfect time to start over, And
I feel like I just want to add on that before we touch on the next thing, is that I feel like what's so hard for people sometimes is, you grow up in the area that you do, in the high school that you do, in the community that you do, and you know the people there, right? But one of the most beautiful things about yeshiva and seminary is that you get to meet so many Jews from across the world. Like some of my best friends that I created, like my shomer, shout out to Andrew Stein. I love you, brother. I don't know if you listen to this one, but like we met in yeshiva, and he was the shomer at my wedding, at our wedding right there. But just like, but like, my roommate was from England. Another one was from Los Angeles. We didn't know each other before. And now like, like you make friendships for life. So just know for yourself if you're making a decision and you end up making a decision because like you don't want to be with a specific crowd of people, and now you're worried and nervous about what's going to come for the year in yeshiva and seminary. Like there's so many people that are in the same boat as you, and you have such an awesome opportunity to make new friends, make new connections,
Right.
And then that's what's so beautiful about Israel, So just like a little bit of reassurance if somebody's like super nervous after making that decision.
I think that's a really good point that we should like for sure flesh out, because I don't know. I like wonder what the percentage of students that go in feeling like that plus of their year is going to be getting to meet new people. Like I really wonder. What do you think? Do you think a lot of students go in feeling like, I'm so excited to make new friends? Or are they thinking, I'm so excited to be in Israel with my friends?
It really depends on the person. And I would say this also. The night before, like, everybody gets on that flight to go to Israel, like, the nerves are through the roof. Yeah. Even if you know so many people are going, because it's like, it's such a new journey. So, like...
so much change.
Exactly.
So fast.
Exactly. Very few people are probably thinking to themselves, I'm so excited to go to my XYZ school because I'm going to meet this random girl or guy that lived in Australia or, like, Amsterdam. Yeah. Like, you don't know who they are. But then once you get to Israel, and then that's another beautiful thing that programs do. They do such a good job of, like, in the beginning of the year, they take you on trips, do icebreakers, and just, they make it easy, in my opinion.
Some of them, I think some of them are larger than others, and some are warmer than others, and some are less diverse.
Valid.
Some only have, like, a couple, like, British people who, like, feel so famous when they come in because it's, like, the first British person people, like, these students ever met before. And then there are other schools that are literally split at half and half with, like, South Africans, Australians, British. Like, it's really, you meet so many new people. And also just, like, shout out to all the out-of-towners, like if you choose an in-town school, like, I mean, I'm calling them in-town. What I mean is like
Stereotypes.
the stereotypical in-town, like first of all, from both ends, I think out-of-towners give in-towners a little bit of a chance and like not jump to conclusions about them and their stereotypes, because a lot of times like it just takes like breaking them up a little bit and like, you know, kind of getting one-on-ones to realize that they do have like depth and tochen and thoughts, and they do think for themselves. And in-towners, let's try to like be a little nice, you know?
And by the way,
let's try to be a little inclusive.
We could say this because we are both from New York, and I will like back you up on that so much. Like, out-of-towners are awesome. Like their walls are just down most of the time. You know, like when you grow up in New York, New Jersey, and obviously this is a whole podcast, and if you guys want a podcast on living in New York, New Jersey, let us know. But it's just like they come in with like, they're just, generally speaking from my experience, like out-of-towners are like more like open to like meeting new people and stuff like that. And then, you know,
it's
New Yorkers
different attitude sometimes.
Exactly, different attitude. We'll talk about that another time.
Yeah. I guess I'm getting too involved in it, but I feel like it's so important going into your year to like just be aware that there are other people out there that just because like they're not exactly like you and wearing the same brands as you and talking about the same exact things, and they don't share experiences with you yet. Like it doesn't, and like they don't know the restaurants you're talking about. It doesn't mean that they're not like super chill. And life is filled with people who are from all over the place. If you're planning on getting a job ever in the city, in a hospital where there are tons of different types of people, you're laughing because I'm going on a bit of a rant.
No, I know who you're talking about, but it's fine.
I'm not talking about one person.
Oh, we're good.
Now I wonder who you're thinking of.
We'll talk after the podcast.
Okay. I'm just saying, like, if you're working in the job market, then you will be meeting people that are not from where you're from. And they are like, and this is, I'm talking to both sides right now. Like at this point, I'm not talking to one side. I'm just saying like to be open to meeting new people, and like life after wherever you came from in your bubble just kind of like pops and everybody's together. So you may as well start in seminary and yeshiva. It's a perfect opportunity to like not reinvent yourself, especially if you're going to a school with friends already, but like to start over kind of, and like whatever preconceived notions you have, just like
throw them out.
Exactly. Throw them out.
What's next?
Politely. You did mention before about like programming, like how schools do a great job at doing icebreakers. So how important do you think is programming in making your decision? Like, this school has this programming, this school has this programming. How important is that?
So important. I'm going to say two things right now. The first is that so many kids in high school, like I've learned this through counseling kids and their parents, and also just conversations with people.
Gap year counseling.
To
clarify.
Gap year counseling.
Not like social work.
Yeah, no, I'm not there. But
one day.
We'll see. but through those conversations, I've seen so many times where a guy or a girl says to me, "Oh, there's no chance." Like they look at the schedule of school. They're like, "You expect me on for 10 hours a day next year? You're crazy." Like a guy that, let's say, example, barely opens a Gemara in high school, looks at the schedule for yeshiva. He's like, morning seder, 3 hours, afternoon seder, 3 hours, night seder. Like, you're crazy. So many people will say, "Hey, that's the structure of a school. Maybe I want a school that has like chesed for the whole afternoon, or maybe I want a school that, you know, just does this or does that. That's not, you know, so intense." But just, in my opinion, a way to navigate the programming of schools is when you're making that decision. If you know somebody, high chance you know somebody in that school that you're thinking about going to, speak to them about what it was like for them in that transition.
And if you can't find somebody
reach out
going to that school, reach out to us and we'll connect you with someone.
Obviously, and there's so many, there's always, in my opinion, somebody in a school that's very similar to you, that had that similar perspective the year before, that you could speak to now hear of how did they get adjusted from having that same perspective that you did a year before. So meaning, what I'm trying to say is, when it comes to programming, you think of, okay, this is the schedule of a specific school, and it looks so intimidating in high school, and you're like, maybe I don't want to go to that school. Just think like, it's not like that from day one. Like, schools do an awesome job at like easing you into it. A lot of schools spend time going on trips in the beginning of the year and stuff like that. That's one thing that's very important.
Wait, so just to define our terms, when I said programming, you're talking about like school, like
the structure of the day.
The structure of the day plus the outside, because I was referring to extracurriculars, but you're talking about both.
So I'll touch on extracurriculars also right now. Is that another thing which is also, I guess, an important factor, is if you say to yourself, "Hey, I want to do chesed for like, you know, a few times a week or whatever, maybe." From a yeshiva and seminary standpoint, I know in seminaries it's more, they're more focused on adding in chesed opportunities throughout your week, but it's also the same in many yeshivas, is like, Yeah, like that programming is important. If you say to yourself in high school, like, I actually want to take my year and like really travel around Israel, there are yeshivas and seminaries that like focus more on the trips and the tiyulim. So like that is also an important kuda as well, an important factor. And the more point that I was just saying before is like, don't necessarily think you can't fit into the structure of a school. That was, I guess, maybe not so on programming, but programming is also an important conversation of like
part of the school's itinerary.
Exactly. I mean, they all work together in my mind, so that's kind of why I added that to my answer. You know, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that there are like outlier schools, and there are exceptions to the rule, like ones that focus on chesed, ones that are in a children's home, ones that are very into like working the land and like very like focused on like kibbutzim and like settling and very Israel focused. But the general rule, I feel like it, that programming, specifically out of school programming, shouldn't necessarily be a factor of why you choose a school and why you don't, or like something to look into, because they all have very similar programming out of school.
You said that actually better than I did. Like I think that echoes my point so much better, is that yes, they all do a very similar job and a very good job at programming, and like, you know, yeah,
like well even in a school that's known to have a ton of learning, like they will have good programming too.
For sure.
Like just because their day is spent morning to night learning, it doesn't mean that they don't carve out time to either go to a lot on a trip, or, you know, Poland, which is a whole other conversation, or go to Masada and Engedi and all these Torah tiyulim, which like could be really fun and are really fun. So get ready. That's a fun part of the year.
I'm with you. What do we got next?
Okay, something else I wanted to discuss was post-gap year plans of the students that are going. And is that something that students should be thinking about before they go in, or it's kind of just something that they figure out while they're there, like, hey, where are you going to college after? Hey, where are you going? Are you going to college? Are you not? Are you staying? Are you blah, blah, blah?
I'm so glad you actually brought this up. I had when I was gap year counseling somebody this year, I'm not going to give any details just for privacy purposes, but the kid that I was speaking with is planning on going to secular college. He's looking at, you know, like 5 options of secular college, and he's like, yeah, like I don't want to go to Yeshiva University. Like that's not, like, really not my plan. So I said to him, okay, once we went through his list of where he's thinking about going for Yeshiva, I said, okay, like, have you ever thought about what the point of Yeshiva is for you? Meaning he was saying, and through the conversation that we had, it was like him and his mom kind of concluded that like they want a yeshiva that's going to help prepare him to be a frum yid in secular college, because he was so set on going. And there are certain schools that do a very good job at that, you know, and that's like an important factor to keep in mind, but like it's also not a deal breaker in my opinion of like where you're going to go for yeshiva and seminary. But it's you want a school where the people around you are going to be supportive of the decision that you're making for after yeshiva and seminary, right? So that's just it. Yeah, there's so much more I could say on that, but like I want to hear what you're going to say, and it's just definitely it's an important piece.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and I think that if it's not something that defines your life, maybe that's like a dramatic way to say it, but if the fact that you're going to secular college, or the fact that you're going to YU, or the fact that your parents are telling you to go to Binghamton, but secretly you really want to be somewhere else, and you have a plan that after seminary yeshiva it's going to change, unless you have strong opinions about it, like it really shouldn't be relevant. But if you do, then like it is something to think about. And like exactly like you said, there are schools like for this kid that you're describing, a school that's going to support that, and that's going to have teachers who aren't really trying to convert you the whole time. And there aren't that many out there like that, but like they exist. So like it's just something to keep in mind, because if that's something that's going to get you upset, if you know the conversation is different than what you want the conversation to be, then like just keep it in mind when you're deciding. And
also, just to add to that, just remember, as like a student, and I tell this to kids in high school all the time, like as much as people think they're set on their life trajectory after yeshiva and seminary before they even step into Israel, just be an open mind and be an open person to understand and say, hey, I might be a senior in high school right now, I might be committed to like Maryland, Binghamton, NYU, whatever these schools are. You know, it's totally fine if you go to these places after yeshiva and seminary. I'm not saying that's like a wrong thing, but I've seen so many people come into Israel saying, that's where I'm going after. Nothing's changing. And then they come into yeshiva and seminary, and then they make like a 180. And either they stay in Israel, they go to YU, they do this, they do that. Like, just be open-minded when it comes to just not being so set. If you want to be set, that's for you to, you know, that's on you, you know?
Right. Yeah, I like that. How important do you think location is? And I'm talking like like on a minor level, but also like on a macro level. Like there are seminaries and yeshivas that span obviously like Yerushalayim, on the outskirts of Yerushalayim. But we're talking like there are some seminaries and yeshivas that are like out there in like Netanya, you know? So should that be a conversation that you have, or like should you be deciding whether you fit somewhere and then being like, oh, I'll make the location work?
So great question also. The location is nice. It's not a deal breaker, in my opinion. Why? The location at the end of the day is not going to have one of the largest impacts on like the way you're influenced in terms of the yeshiva and seminary year. Yeah, if you're living in the old city, I get it. It's a crazy experience, and maybe that will do something for you, like, you know, just living in, you know, a far out place other than Yerushalayim. But what I think is important for people to remember is that, first of all, most schools are based in Yerushalayim. That's the first thing. The second thing is, when you're looking into a school, you want to know, okay, are the classes something that I would be interested in? Are the teachers the type of people that I would vibe with? Like, the food is another conversation I'm not even going to talk about. Like, don't go to a school because of the food. But, like, the location is, like, it's nice. Okay, it could add to your experience, you know? But it's not a deal breaker in my opinion. You know, what do you think?
I don't even know if I agree with that. Like,
you went in the old city, so it's you know.
Right. So I guess for me, since I went to seminary in the old city, I don't think that location was make it or break it, because I guess I was also deciding between seminaries in a similar area. But looking back, it's like the type of thing that you wouldn't see ahead of time unless you're really thinking about it. But looking back, it's just like I couldn't have imagined not being in the old city. And I feel like if that's something you're passionate about, then like location could make all the difference. Like, and also for some reason, like, I mean, your answer could be what a lot of people think. Like, for sure, I feel like is an opinion that's out there. But like my heart goes out to like those parents that like always dreamed of getting a chance to do that, or they did when they were younger, and like it was the best time of their lives, and all they want is for their kids to have that same thing where like they got to live in Yerushalayim, walk the streets of Meish Arim every Friday, and not just like be on a rush and on a bus, you know. And I'm not really like just talking about the old city, and honestly, like we talk about the positives of, like I mentioned before, Netanya, like maybe also like that's your dream, to just feel like you're a little bit like on a like it's your gap year, you want to relax, you want to feel like you're in a place that's like beautiful. Like Netanya's stunning. Like the weather is nice significantly more often than it is in other places, like in Yerushalayim. Obviously Yerushalayim is like the holy of holies, so that's a huge factor. So I don't necessarily disagree with you. I just think there's so many people out there who like it is a huge factor for. So I guess it really depends how much it is for you. Like if somebody's pushing you in a certain direction, that somebody's usually family. But if you're being pushed for like location, but to you it's not so important, I feel like that's something to like think about. For
sure, I'm with you. I don't disagree on that one.
Right. And I feel like nobody's like really that extreme about location, that if they were excited about being in Yerushalayim, like they would make a crazy decision to go to a school that they felt was totally unfit for them. Like I don't feel like anybody would really do that just because they want to be in Yerushalayim, right. You know?
I'm with you.
And there are so many options that like you'll find something near. Also, for those of you for seminary girls already who decided to go to a school that maybe isn't in the location of their choice, you know, you'll always make it to wherever you want to be. If you're in Yerushalayim, you will have time to make it out to Netanya. And if you're in Netanya, you will have time, like not as often as other schools, but like you will be able to make it into Yerushalayim. And they usually really try to help facilitate that. Like I know schools in Beit Shemesh often offer a van during nights off, and like they really try to help facilitate that. You'll have Shabbatonim, you'll have you'll definitely experience like Shabbos and life in other locations.
And just one point to add to that, which I completely agree with the point you just said, is that what's also really cool about many schools is they allow you to bring like a friend from another yeshiva or seminary for Shabbos with you.
That's a good point.
Right? Like I checked out like 4 different yeshivas when I was in Shana Aleph, because like I just was like, text my friend, I'm like, hey, like can I pull up for Shabbos? You know, and then now you get to see that experience, you know. And then it was funny because oftentimes when I came back from those Shabbosim, I was so much more appreciative of the yeshiva that I was in. Because I was like, oh, like I actually made the best decision for myself. Like, oh yeah, I was thinking about a specific school. I went there for Shabbos. I was like, it was a nice time, you know. Right. But like I came back and I was like, wow, like I'm home, you know.
Right. So you were saying like location for you like isn't a key deciding factor,
but it could be nice.
Right, it could be nice. So what other things do you feel like are just things that somebody shouldn't make their decision on?
What I said before. Food.
Oh, food. Unless you have severe allergies, then
obviously. But like, first of all, I heard about a story. It must have been like 4 years ago. There was a certain girl in a specific seminary that was literally allergic to everything that you could think of. like to the point where she could not eat any of the food of the seminary, and then the parents had to accommodate through the school. I think helped facilitate it. I don't know like the financial parts of this, but they literally there's a company here. I'm forgetting the name. If you guys want to know the details, reach out to me. I can try to find it. Where like they literally make meals designed for students that cannot just allergy wise survive in their school. And like every single, actually it was a girl. And then I'm thinking about a guy in another yeshiva that this happened to a few years ago, where like every like 2 or 3 days, somebody would come to the front door of the yeshiva, drop off the meals for him for like, a few days at a time, and he would heat them up in the microwave. Like,
right. I feel like even for someone like you though, who has many allergies, could still like we're not scaring people who have allergies. Like you survived just fine in a normal yeshiva requesting accommodations, and it was okay.
Baruch Hashem. And I want to touch on another thing to answer your question is there's I was talking to somebody this year. I'll keep the details also, private on this one, but there's a certain person I know who's a Rebbe in yeshiva, and he said to me, he was like, literally, guys showed up and decided one of the main reasons why they wanted to come to our yeshiva was because of the weight room. The weight room. And I'm like we're laughing at it, but like, and if a guy's listening to this and he's like, come on, bro, like the weight room's important. First of all, there are so many gyms around so many different yeshivas.
Well, do you want to spend money on them or not is also a factor.
Okay. Obviously that's an important factor, but if a guy's willing, in my opinion, this is just my perspective, and if somebody disagrees, hit me up and we'll talk about it. But like, that's also another thing. Like it's not a reason to make or break a decision of a yeshiva. Do you have anything to add before I keep going?
No, that was really interesting. I wasn't even thinking about a gym. I feel like for so many people, like the gym before they come to yeshiva and seminary is their life. And it's like an adjustment because like, okay, maybe I can handle a full day of learning, but like a full day of no gym, what am I going to do? And a school that accommodates for that. Well, let's talk about also accommodations in general. Like
that was my next topic.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Because I remember when I was checking out seminaries in my 12th grade, I stayed at a seminary that was my second option, and I loved it. It was so nice. Everything was just clean and beautiful, and like I felt like I felt like a human being. Then I went to this other seminary, and like I felt like I was in like whatever. It was a different experience, and like I saw also like the charm, and like it was so warm and cozy and interesting, and I ended up going to the second seminary. There
you go. And I'm gonna kind of,
by the way, they're not really like that anymore. They've upgraded since, if you know what seminary I went to. So it's not, my opinion still wouldn't be the same, but I'm saying like I'm very, very happy that I didn't make my decision based off of accommodations and how nice or not nice the grounds were.
1,000%.
It's tempting.
I'm gonna add a point to that, and this is what I think I've realized over the time, is that just by the way, an expectation I think that people need to set is that obviously everybody has their own family living situation wherever they live in the world. Some people have a nicer house. Some people have not as nice a house. But don't ever expect, this is like a statement I'm just going to say, like don't ever expect the yeshiva or seminary you go to look like your house or your bedroom or anything. Like I've seen kids, and I had this conversation before, where they walk into the room on the first day and they're like, you expect me to live in here? Like one closet, like 4 bedrooms in like a small room. Like what?
It's also funny because these students grew up going to camp.
Right.
And like they're shocked when they come here and like, how am I going to live here for a whole year?
Yeah.
But they do it.
And what I think is a huge point of why it's an adjustment obviously for everybody, but why do I think people end up adjusting to it and that becomes their new life in Israel is because every other person on your program is in the same predicament as you. And so many people are going through that same experience at the beginning of like, it's almost always going to be uncomfortable for the first week or two, however long. There's an adjustment process, what I'm trying to say, of when you come into your school for the first day and you need to get adjusted to your new room. It doesn't look the way you did it or wanted or expected or whatever. But like, okay, everybody else is pretty much in the same bubble as you. We're like, it's going to be okay.
Everyone in your school. I think the hard part is when you're in your decisions, which is what this whole episode's about, that it's like you keep imagining yourself living in like better conditions or like fancier accommodations, and like you have that choice in your hands. Once you make that decision, okay, you won't regret it because everybody's on the same boat. And like, okay, you'll go for Shabbos somewhere nicer and you'll be like, it seems really nice here, but you won't really care. At the end of the day, like you'll treat yourself to like a nice, that's what I did. Like I went to my friend's dorm and I was like, can I just take a nice shower here? And she was like, yeah, of course. But I feel like when you're in the moment, it's totally fine. But beforehand, like it could really feel like a factor, even if you don't want to admit to yourself that it is.
1,000%. I completely agree.
Yeah. Is there any other thing you had in mind that like is something that you shouldn't make your decision based on? food, accommodations.
I'm thinking right now. I have other just like anecdotes or advice I'm gonna give.
Okay, so let's hear general tips.
I'm gonna say the first thing that just comes to mind, and I've had this conversation with so many people, is that at the end of the day, after all the research that you do, hopefully you got into the schools that you want to. Very rarely, from what I've seen, does anybody ever go into the school that they're going into and, be there for a few months, and on a random Tuesday afternoon as they're eating lunch in the Chadar Ochel in the lunchroom, they're thinking to themselves, what would it have been like if I was in XYZ Yeshiva or Seminary? Like if I ended up going there. Meaning, when you're in the decision process, you think to yourself, oh my God, I have like, hopefully this school I want to go to and that school that I want to go to. And it's such a tough decision for so many people, rightfully so, because these schools look very similar. But at the end of the day, wherever you're going to go, you're almost always going to be happy. Obviously, there are exceptions. People go to the year in Israel and they don't have the best experience. But in my opinion, from what I've seen, probably wouldn't have the best experience in another school if they went to, because Israel's a hard year sometimes for people. But what I'm trying to say is that it's going to be okay. And wherever you choose to go to, like, you're never going to be thinking in the middle of the year, what would it have been like if I went to XYZ school instead?
Or you will.
Or you might.
Maybe it's like the exception to the rule, those people who do
Exception,
think
yes.
that. And obviously we're not talking about people who for some reason have to make a switch in the middle for one reason or another. They feel like they're in a position where like they don't really have a choice. But even students who like do have those thoughts sometimes, and like going in, like I'm not trying to scare you. I'm just trying to like make sure that we're talking about every side of it, that, you could have those thoughts, but I still stand with what you're saying. And I still think that even if you do have those random thoughts, and even if you do spend a Shabbos somewhere else and you feel like it was nice and, your friend seems so happy, just to remember that you will end up in the place that you're meant to be.
And I'm going to add to that is that, and this is just like, I've seen this from so many conversations with people, is that like the stress leading up to the day where you have to make your decision it's there, right? But at the end of the day, once you click that button of I want to go to this school for next year, just sit back and like relax and just be happy about that. Like so many people I've seen click that button and they're like, did I make the right decision? Did I not make the right decision? But like the fact that you did all the research leading up to that specific school and that decision that you wanted to ultimately go with for your year in Israel, which is a huge decision. Since you did all that research, just know, and you could sit back confidently, in my opinion, from my experience, what I've seen with people, that you did make the right decision for yourself. That's another huge point.
It reminds me of when I was making a really big decision in my life.
There you go. Well, yeah.
I remember like I was taught the quote, "Ein simcha k'hataras hasfekos." There's no happiness like the releasing of doubts. And making any decision in life is really stressful, but there's no happiness like finally just making that decision and just sitting with it and telling yourself that you're going to make the most of it. And even if, some curveballs are thrown at you and you were expecting this and it didn't quite meet your expectations, like you will have, if you make it, you will have the best year of your life. But as Rabbi Gabe Mailer says,
if you let it, make your year. And I think we could end off on that point. And I think that's just well said, right?
I do think that there's actually one more thing that we need to address, which is like the fact, and it's not necessarily the elephant in the room, but like it's a really important part that some people don't get accepted, first of all, to any seminaries or yeshivas, and some other people don't get accepted to their number ones, and some people don't get accepted to their third one. I remember when I was applying to seminary, and it's not nearly in the same category as not getting accepted into seminary at all. But I remember when they came out and it was rolling, and each school sent it at their own time, and I found out first that I didn't get into my lowest choice school. So like the panic that set in, I was just like, if I didn't get into the third option, like then I didn't get into my first option. There's no way. And thank God I did in the end, but like how scary and disheartening and adjusting your expectations like that. And for people who have to like fight their way into schools, it's really like my heart just goes out to them. And I think just, I mean, I can't say anything, but to try to, talking about the people who find their way into a school, hopefully you'll feel like you ended up in the right place and that this is where you were meant to be, you know?
Yeah, and I want to touch on that. Just I've had conversations with so many people before that didn't get into the school that they of their choice. Literally, last week, I got a message from someone. He didn't get into the school of his choice. He ended up getting into the second option, and he ended up going there and was so happy.
Right.
Right. And I just want to say to anybody that's listening to this that doesn't get accepted to a specific yeshiva or seminary, it does not mean you're a bad person.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you're not going to have the best year ever, assuming wherever you go in Israel. There are hundreds of students and hundreds of applicants that apply to school sometimes. And through a little interview and a little bit of research they're able to do like on you or talk to people about you, they only know you so much. So I've seen too many people that get rejected from a school and think I'm a bad person. They don't want me, you know?
Not I'm a bad person, but like maybe people conclude that like just everyone's better and smarter and whatever than them.
Right. I've seen so many amazing people not get into schools that they wanted to. Okay, there's only so much schools can learn about a student through that interview process, and just like to reiterate that point to everybody that like just because you get into a place doesn't mean you're not good, doesn't mean you're a bad student or whatever it may be, and hopefully you're going to have an amazing year. And I've seen that in so many situations.
I know somebody a few years ago that didn't get into any yeshiva that he applied to, and he ended up pushing his way into something. It took a lot of work, and first of all, it sounds like a success story. Oh, you pushed your way in. Great. You got what you wanted. But then you're coming in feeling like you were once rejected, which I should also say to those people who did push their way in, everyone forgot. Okay. You walked in on the first day. Nobody remembers that you weren't accepted to begin with. They don't remember. They have a whole roster of students. They never had anything against you to begin with. They just accepted other people first. And then you fell by the wayside, but you got in and you're here. And that student specifically that I'm thinking about flourished and is still connected to every single rabbi from his yeshiva and is so happy with the experience that he had, and there's not even an ounce of him that feels like there was a reason for it, and it kind of just needed to happen so he could develop his character.
Fully. I could not agree more.
It's all character development. So I think we just needed, we definitely discussed talking about this in this episode a little bit more. And then I think we decided that, it's not the episode for that. And we really just want to touch on making your decision in general. But I think we do need to touch on it, at least a little bit. So I'm glad we did.
As they say in the future, tzarch Ian. We might have to get a little more
Ian.
No pun intended.
Mm-hmm.
But I just want to say it's been a pleasure having a conversation with you and doing this podcast.
You too, Avi.
And I'm kind of down to do this again on another topic.
Yeah, let us know what you guys thought about this. If you thought that this kind of schmoozing episode was interesting and obviously like a little bit lighter than what we've done in the past. But yeah.
And stay tuned. There's
Thanks
just
for listening, guys.
so much coming this season, B'ezrat Hashem. And we'll see you guys soon.
Peace.
That's a wrap for this week's episode. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any follow-up questions, my information is in the show notes. Obviously, you could always reach out to me, and I'm here to help. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to share it with somebody. Give it a like on YouTube. Subscribe. I just got to say that because that's what helps these videos grow. So thank you guys so much for watching and doing everything that you do to support Israel Gap Year. We'll see you guys all in about 2 weeks right on Shushan Purim for next week's episode. Stay tuned. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you soon.